everyone. Thank you so much for being part of this new episode of the podcast on tobacco control. On the show today, I have a special guest from the Center for Trade Policy and Development who will explain to us what the tobacco control bill is all about and why it is important for Zambia to enact this bill. Welcome to the show and tell us a bit about yourself and what you do at the Center for Trade Policy and Development.
My name is Luyando Muloshi. I am a lawyer by profession, an advocate for the High Court of Zambia. I hold a bachelor's and master's degree from the University of Zambia, and currently I'm working as a legal researcher at the Center for Trade Policy and Development. My work revolves around analyzing various pieces of legislation, proposed bills, and giving legislative analysis of these particular pieces of legislation, areas for legislative reform, as well as just breaking down some of these provisions in more simplistic ways and having people understand them in a much easier way. I have been working in the tobacco control space for the past 1 year, which has involved me looking at some of the proposed legislation that has been given around tobacco control within the country.
To get into the conversation, what does the tobacco control bill entails for Zambia?
The tobacco control bill is a proposed piece of law that has been drafted by the government. It aims to reduce the consumption of tobacco within the country, as well as to reduce demand for tobacco. This bill, once enacted into law, will in essence domesticate the World Health Organization Framework Convention on Tobacco Control, the FCTC. The provisions of the Tobacco Control Bill mostly relate to non-price measures to reduce the demand for tobacco within the country. And these relate to the protection from exposure to tobacco smoke, the regulation of the contents of tobacco products, the regulation of tobacco product disclosures, issues relating to packaging and labeling of tobacco products, which is one of the biggest things within the country. Once you look at how tobacco products are displayed, most of them are actually glamorized, and it's easy for young people to be attracted to those particular issues. But then when you've got graphic images which are in place, which will be provided for by this particular law, you in essence are trying to reduce the demand for tobacco consumption within the country. It also has provisions relating to enhanced education, communication, training, and public awareness when it comes to the harmful effects of tobacco consumption. Also regulating tobacco advertising, promotion, and sponsorship. Currently in the country, because we don't have this tobacco control bill or law that's in place, it's easy to have advertisements, promotions. If you've got their billboards which have been put in place promoting tobacco consumption and increasing demand for tobacco. So with this particular piece of law in place, you have something that is there to reduce demand for tobacco by regulating the tobacco advertising. We also have other demand reduction measures that relate to tobacco dependency and cessation that have been provided for within this bill. Another important proviso within the tobacco control bill is to establish the Tobacco Control Committee, which in essence would be responsible for regulating tobacco consumption within the country, to be the one that would be on the necks of responsible institutions that should ensure that this law is properly implemented once it comes into place. Because it's one thing to have a piece of law that's in place, but it's another thing to actually have it properly implemented. And that's one of the biggest things we have in the country, is where you've got good pieces of laws, but they are not properly implemented. And this is what the committee would be doing, in essence, to try as much as possible to effectively implement the tobacco control bill if and when enacted into law.
Having explained what the tobacco control bill entails, what's the current status of legislation on the tobacco control bill, and why has Zambia not made any progress in domesticating this, despite being a signatory to the World Health Organization Framework Convention on Tobacco Control.
The current status of the tobacco control bill is that it's still in draft form, and how laws are enacted in the country is that once a bill has been drafted, it's first presented to cabinet, which consists of the president, the vice president, and the ministers, who then are responsible for approving these particular bills. Once they've been approved by cabinet, the next step is that they go to parliament for debate, and ultimately parliament, which is the legislative function of government, is the one that's responsible for enacting a bill into law once it's passed through all the stages that are required, which is the first reading, the second reading, the committee stage, the reporting stage, and finally ascension into law by the president. So with those steps in place, as it relates to the tobacco control bill, it has not been approved by cabinet, and that's the status of it. It's still sitting at cabinet's office and waiting for approval by cabinet. So as it is, it's still stalling. It has not made its way to parliament yet. It hasn't made its way to be read within parliament. It's still at a very, very early stage, which is actually the initial stage, which is the approval of cabinet, and that hasn't happened yet. It's still waiting cabinet approval. And the reason for that has been speculative. There's no concrete reason that's in place, because we are mere spectators. We don't sit in cabinet. We don't know what's happening. But as it is, you can see that there has been a lot of push and pull by the tobacco industry, which is a very powerful industry and has the potential to influence people who are in a position to actually make sure that this bill is enacted into law. So one of the biggest issues we have inferred why the bill has not been approved by cabinet has been tobacco control interference, and them having a high voice and influence on governmental decisions because of how powerful they are economically, financially. And that's why the tobacco control bill has been stalling. So there's need for concerted effort to ensure that we actually push this bill.
What has been happening in terms of civil society like CTPD? What have you been doing to champion the enactment of the bill?
As civil society organizations like CTPD, we have, as much as possible through our advocacy works, tried to push government to enact the tobacco control bill. We have written different articles. We have appeared on various radio programs. We've appeared on television. We have gone as far as writing research papers, generating empirical evidence, going into the field, looking at the harmful effects of tobacco consumption, writing evidence-generated research papers to ensure that we actually produce something concrete on the harmful effects of tobacco consumption, and have pushed government as much as possible and presented them with, look, these are our findings, these are our research pieces. What are you doing about it? Why aren't you taking action on the enactment of the tobacco control bill? In addition, we are not the only civil society that has been pushing for tobacco control within the country. There are different organizations. We've tried as much as possible to enhance collaboration with other like-minded organizations that are working around the tobacco control voice, so that we speak with one voice. We've gone as far as engaging artists, from cartoonists to poets to singers to activists, to push in the fight against tobacco consumption within the country. So we've really been pushing and trying to make sure that we have a strong voice so that we are heard. And I'm pretty sure the government has heard us, but they're not listening to us. They've heard, but they're not listening, and no action is being taken. But that doesn't mean we are giving up in our fight. We know that it's a hard battle. We are fighting against a powerful industry, so we know that it's not going to be an easy fight. But we still continue to be relentless. We continue to put the biggest fight as we can and hope that one day it's going to pay off. And I know it will eventually, and we just have to continue in the fight and continue to actually push for reform.
As we come to the end of this podcast, what are your last words? Why should government speed up the process of enacting the tobacco control bill?
My last words are that let's continue to hold steadfast in our fight. Let's continue to enhance collaborative efforts amongst like-minded institutions that are working within the tobacco control space, so that we speak with one voice, which is even better because you come with a stronger voice. Let's use all available tools that are there to us to reach the general public. Let's make use of social media in particular, which has become one of the easiest ways to get at the attention of the masses. And beyond that, let's also make this an ongoing conversation that we continue to have through and through. Let us make the need for having the tobacco control law in place and how important it is. Let us package our information in such a way that every member in society is able to understand what this piece of law entails, how useful it will be in the country and why we need it, and the harmful effects of tobacco consumption, and how the right to health is more important before any economic gain that you will have within the country. And let's just continue to hold steadfast in our battle and to continue to fight the good fight, and hope that one day we will actually make a difference.
Well, listeners, thank you so much for being part of this podcast. Do join us again next time as we discuss another exciting topic on tobacco control related issues.